The wind howled through the dense, alien trees, bending their thick branches with a force that sent a shiver down the human spine. No sign of life, no birds, no insects, no movement. The silence felt wrong, like an unseen predator was watching from the shadows. Alaric had landed on this barren world after being marooned by a broken navigation system. A mistake, perhaps, but it had been weeks now, and he knew that help would never come. The planet was cold and hostile. The sun barely broke through the thick clouds, leaving the landscape bathed in an eternal twilight. The air was thin, and the gravity was stronger than Earth's, weighing down on him with every step. He had been scavenging for food, but his thoughts weren't focused on survival, they were on something far worse. Something his mind had refused to acknowledge until now: he was being hunted. Alaric had learned about the predator from an old, forgotten archive on his ship's database. This wasn't just any predator, it was known across galaxies as the most deadly creature to ever exist. It was fast, brutal, and incredibly intelligent. No one had ever managed to escape it alive. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he crouched low, trying to make himself as invisible as possible. Every instinct told him to move, to run, to hide, but something was different this time. There was no sound, no growl, no warning. Just the unmistakable feeling that he was not alone. He could feel its presence. The creature was out there, somewhere, watching. Waiting. A rustle in the brush to his right snapped him out of his daze. His heart slammed against his ribcage as his body instinctively froze. He had to keep moving, he couldn't afford to be seen. But his body felt paralyzed, the weight of the moment pressing down on him harder than the gravity of this forsaken world. The brush rustled again, closer this time. Too close. Alaric's hand darted to his side, grasping the pulse rifle he had scavenged days before. He didn't want to use it, he didn't want to make noise. But there was no choice now. Then, as if the predator had sensed his thoughts, there was a sudden snap, a bone-chilling growl that vibrated through his bones. His blood turned to ice. The predator was real, and it was here. He bolted, running as fast as his legs could carry him through the dense undergrowth, but it was already too late. There was a flash of movement in the corner of his eye, something too fast, too agile for him to track. Then, in the blink of an eye, the world tilted as something heavy slammed into him from behind. He was on the ground, wind knocked out of him. His pulse rifle clattered a few feet away, out of his reach. He scrambled to regain control, but before he could even take a breath, he felt it, its hot breath on the back of his neck. The weight of the creature's presence crushed him, and he knew, with a gut-wrenching certainty, that if he didn't do something in the next few seconds, this would be his last moment. Stay calm. Think. Think, damn it. His eyes darted to his surroundings, desperate for something, anything to help him survive. His mind raced as the predator moved in for the kill, its claws scraping the rocky ground beneath them. A chill ran through him, but he managed to roll to the side, barely evading the creature's strike. Alaric scrambled to his feet, adrenaline surging through his veins as he reached for the pulse rifle. He could hear the predator's low growl as it tracked his movements, testing his every move. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse. The stakes were unimaginable, his life on the line with every passing second. The predator didn't make mistakes. It had hunted and killed for eons, and now it was hunting him. Alaric's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to think. He needed a plan, a way to escape, something to even the odds. But how could he possibly outsmart a creature with instincts far sharper than his own? The wind howled again, carrying with it the distinct scent of the creature, a sharp, musky odor that made Alaric's stomach turn. The creature's hunting call echoed in the distance, its eerie sound causing his heart to race even faster. It was closing in. The fear that gripped him was suffocating, but it was also grounding. He was a human, and if there was one thing that separated humans from the rest of the galaxy's creatures, it was their ability to adapt, to fight back against impossible odds. This was his one chance, his only chance. Alaric drew in a deep breath, steadying himself. The predator was relentless, but so was he. Alaric's breath came in sharp, ragged gasps as his eyes scanned the thick underbrush around him. Every rustle of leaves, every shift in the air, sent a spike of panic through his chest. The predator was close, he could feel it. It was patient, waiting for him to make a mistake, waiting for him to reveal his position. It knew how to toy with its prey, how to push them to the edge of madness before striking the fatal blow. He clutched the pulse rifle tightly in his hands, but it felt like a useless tool in the face of such an overwhelming threat. The creature had no need for weapons, its claws were sharp enough to slice through metal, and its speed was unmatched. His only hope now was to stay calm, to think, to outwit the hunter that had made a mockery of entire civilizations. He forced himself to move, staying low and quiet, hoping to blend into the shadows cast by the dark trees. The gravity here was oppressive, making every step a struggle. But there was no time to rest. No time to think of anything but survival. A sudden noise to his left caught his attention. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He snapped his head in that direction, but saw nothing. Just the dense trees and the eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. It was as if the world itself had held its breath, waiting for the predator to make its move. Alaric's mind raced. How long could he keep running? The creature had been tracking him for hours, maybe longer. It was smart, too smart for him to outpace. He had to make a stand. But where? How? The landscape offered few options, and he didn't have the luxury of time to scout for a better position. Then, something caught his eye. A small cave, barely large enough for him to fit in, but it was better than nothing. It was his only shot. If he could reach it, maybe he could buy himself enough time to think of a way to fight back. Maybe he could trap the predator. Or at least find a way to escape. The moment the thought crossed his mind, the predator seemed to know. There was no sound, no warning, just the unmistakable sense that the creature was on the move. A soft growl echoed in the distance, followed by the faintest rustle of leaves. Alaric's heart skipped a beat. Too late. The predator was already closing in. Without a second thought, he sprinted toward the cave, his legs pumping, every muscle in his body screaming in protest. His lungs burned as he pushed himself harder, faster. The predator was fast, but he had something the creature didn't: unpredictability. The human instinct to fight, to survive. Alaric reached the cave just as the sound of claws scraping against rock reached his ears. He dove into the entrance, barely avoiding a swipe that would have torn him apart. His pulse raced as he rolled into the darkness of the cave, gasping for air, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. For a moment, there was silence. Alaric's eyes adjusted to the dim light. He could barely make out the jagged rocks around him, the narrow passageway that led deeper into the earth. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. If the predator found him here, it would be over. But for now, he was safe. For now, he had time. He pressed his back against the cool stone of the cave wall and tried to steady his breathing. He couldn't afford to panic. Not now. Not when every second counted. The silence was deafening. The predator was out there, somewhere, its senses heightened. It would be tracking him, sniffing the air, waiting for the slightest sound. Alaric's heart still pounded, but he knew he couldn't stay in the cave forever. He needed to make a plan. He needed to think. His mind drifted to the database he'd found on his ship. The predator was known for its speed, its strength, and its ruthlessness. But there was one thing that had stood out, a small detail that could make all the difference. The creature was intelligent, yes, but it was also overconfident. It underestimated its prey. Alaric's lips curled into a slight grin. Maybe he didn't need to outrun it. Maybe he just needed to outsmart it. He could hear the faintest sound now, the predator's low growl as it circled the cave. It was closer than he'd expected, but it hadn't entered yet. The creature wasn't sure where he had gone. It was trying to flush him out, but Alaric wasn't going to give it that satisfaction. He waited, motionless, barely breathing, every sense on high alert. And then, it happened. A crack echoed through the air. The predator had made its move, charging directly toward the cave entrance. Alaric's pulse skyrocketed. He could hear the ground tremble with each heavy step, could feel the wind whip through the narrow opening as the creature barreled toward him. There was no time left. No more waiting. Alaric knew what he had to do. The air in the cave was thick with tension. Alaric pressed himself deeper into the shadows, his pulse hammering in his ears. The predator was close, he could feel it. The ground vibrated with each thunderous step, and the growl grew louder, more menacing, as it approached. There was no turning back now. He couldn't run. The predator would catch him easily if he tried. He had no weapons left, except for his mind and the limited resources he had scavenged from his surroundings. He needed to fight smart, not hard. He had to use the terrain, use the predator's arrogance against it. The growl echoed again, closer now. A ripple of cold dread ran down Alaric's spine as he tightened his grip on a jagged rock in front of him. It was the only thing he could use to defend himself, and even that felt like a poor excuse for a weapon. He didn't have much time. The predator was almost on top of him. Its breath, thick and foul, seeped into the cave's narrow entrance, and its eyes, glowing faintly in the dark, shone like twin yellow lanterns in the dim light. Its massive form loomed just outside, its size so imposing that Alaric felt small and insignificant in comparison. He could hear the creature sniffing the air, searching for his scent. Its claws scraped against the rock as it circled, patiently, methodically. It wasn't in a rush. It was used to playing with its prey, tormenting it until the inevitable end. The predator had never failed before, and Alaric was nothing more than another fragile creature to be hunted. But not today. Not on his watch. Alaric's eyes darted to his right. The cave narrowed there, a small passageway that led deeper into the rock. It was his only escape route if things went wrong, but it was also a trap. The predator would chase him there, corner him, and it would be over. But if he used it cleverly, if he could get the creature to chase him just right, he might have a chance. It was now or never. Alaric stood suddenly, startling the predator. The creature's growl became more aggressive, its claws scraping along the cave's floor as it lunged forward, sensing the movement. Alaric's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't flinch. He knew he had only one shot at this. He ducked into the narrow passage just as the predator lunged toward him, its jaws snapping in the air behind him. The creature was faster than anything he had ever encountered, but Alaric had the advantage of knowing the terrain. He had been moving through this cave for hours, and he knew its twists and turns better than the predator could ever hope to. He sprinted, his footsteps echoing off the walls, but the creature was right behind him. He could hear its breath, ragged and furious, just inches away. It was so close now that he could almost feel the heat of its body. His mind raced, he needed to act quickly. He needed to make the creature think it had him trapped. He reached a dead end in the passageway. A sharp turn to his left led to a rocky ledge, far too narrow to escape on foot. But it was perfect for his plan. Alaric had seen this spot earlier. It was his only option. He slid to a stop just before the edge, dropping to a crouch. The predator was close, so close, its massive form blocking the narrow passage behind him. It roared, its eyes burning with rage, and Alaric barely had time to react. With a burst of energy, he reached out and grabbed the rock he had positioned earlier, swinging it with all his might. The predator hesitated, its focus momentarily distracted by the motion. Alaric used that split second to his advantage. With a swift move, he darted to the side, diving into the crevice beside the ledge. His body slammed into the rock, and for a moment, everything went black as his vision blurred from the impact. The predator's roar echoed in the cave as it charged forward, missing its prey by mere inches. The creature's massive body slammed into the edge of the ledge, sending rocks tumbling down into the darkness below. It howled in frustration, but Alaric didn't dare move. He pressed himself flat against the cold stone, holding his breath, praying the predator wouldn't hear his heartbeat pounding in his chest. Time seemed to stretch on forever. Alaric's muscles ached from the tension, and his body screamed for him to move, but he knew he couldn't risk making a sound. Every second that passed felt like an eternity, and every small movement from the predator sent a shock of fear through him. Finally, the growl of the predator faded, and Alaric risked a glance. The creature was circling again, its attention momentarily diverted by the chaos it had caused in the narrow passage. It was just as Alaric had planned. He had tricked it, forced it into a blind spot where it couldn't track his movements. But the relief was short-lived. He couldn't keep this up forever. The predator was too relentless, too clever. It would figure him out soon enough. He had to move, had to find a way to end this hunt before it ended him. Alaric's eyes darted around the narrow ledge. He could see the exit, a small opening just above the ledge. It wasn't much, but it was his best shot at escaping. If he could climb up there, if he could find a way to get out of the creature's reach, he might just survive this. But there was a problem. The predator wasn't giving up. It was waiting for him to make a mistake. The silence in the cave felt suffocating. Alaric's every breath seemed louder than it should be, his pulse thundering in his ears. The predator was circling the ledge now, its growl vibrating the very walls around him. Alaric could feel the heat of its body as it moved just below him, the ground trembling under its weight. His hands were slick with sweat as he gripped the jagged rocks beneath him, trying to steady himself. He had to make a move. The predator had already figured out that the dead end wasn't his final destination. It wasn't stupid, it was learning. Alaric knew it would adapt, just as it always had. He needed to buy more time, but how? The predator's senses were too sharp. Any sound, any sudden movement would be enough to alert it. If he stayed here, it would eventually wear him down, and when it did, he wouldn't be able to escape. But then, a thought struck him. The creature might be fast, but it wasn't invincible. There was something in the cave that could help him, something he had seen earlier. It was a risk, but at this point, he didn't have many options. He would have to use the environment, force the predator into a trap of his own making. Alaric shifted slightly, angling himself just enough to peer around the edge of the ledge. He could see the predator pacing below him, its glowing eyes scanning the shadows for him. It wasn't in a rush. It knew he was here. It knew it would find him eventually. The ledge above him was narrow, barely wide enough for him to squeeze through, but the opening was there. The question was, could he reach it before the predator figured out where he was? Without giving himself time to second guess, Alaric pushed himself up, grabbing onto the rocks above the ledge. His muscles screamed in protest as he pulled himself upward, but he ignored the pain. This was his chance. It was now or never. The predator's growl echoed through the cave again, and Alaric's heart skipped a beat. It had heard something. It had to have. He could feel its presence, closer, closer with every passing second. The sound of claws scraping against the stone floor reached his ears, and Alaric's breath caught in his throat. He was almost there. One more move. Just one more. With all the strength he had left, he shoved himself upward, his arms straining as he reached for the narrow ledge. The predator roared in fury below him, its breath hot and heavy, but Alaric was already scrambling up, inching closer to the opening. And then, just as his hand grasped the edge, he felt it, a massive weight slamming into his leg. The predator's claws tore into his flesh, and pain exploded through his body, sharp and agonizing. Alaric bit back a scream, his grip faltering as the creature tried to drag him back down. In that instant, everything seemed to freeze. The predator was so close to ending him. But Alaric wasn't ready to die. Not yet. He reached down, his fingers finding the pulse rifle that had fallen earlier. With a final burst of energy, he swung it up and fired blindly at the creature, praying he would hit something vital. The shot rang out, echoing in the cave, and for a moment, there was nothing, just the deafening sound of his heartbeat. Then, a howl of pain tore through the air. The predator recoiled, its grip loosening as it staggered back. The shot had hit, it had to have hit. Alaric didn't wait to check. He pulled himself up with every ounce of strength he had left, clawing his way toward the opening above. His legs burned, his body screamed in protest, but he didn't stop. The predator was disoriented, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. It would adapt. It always did. Finally, with one last desperate push, Alaric pulled himself up and through the narrow opening. He was free. For now. He collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air, his body aching from the effort. His leg was bleeding, the wound deep, but it wasn't fatal. Not yet. He could deal with that later. Right now, he needed to keep moving. He couldn't stop. Not when he knew the predator was still out there, still hunting. The ground here was different, more stable, less treacherous. But there was no time to enjoy it. The cave was vast, and the predator was relentless. It would track him to the ends of the earth if it had to. Alaric could feel the creature's gaze, even now, burning into the back of his mind. It wasn't done with him. But neither was he. Alaric knew this was just the beginning. The predator had made a mistake, it had underestimated him. And now, he had a plan. He wasn't just running anymore. He was going to fight back. Alaric took a deep breath and moved forward. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time since this nightmare began, he felt like he had a chance. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the narrow passage, the only noise in a world otherwise steeped in silence. Alaric's chest heaved with each breath, and his leg throbbed where the predator had struck. He had to ignore the pain. He had to focus. His mind raced, strategizing, analyzing, trying to find the one weakness the predator had left to exploit. He wasn't out of danger, far from it. But for the first time, he felt a flicker of hope. He wasn't just the prey anymore. He could turn the tables. Alaric paused, glancing back at the narrow tunnel he had just crawled through. It was the only escape route, the only place that had given him a moment of respite. The predator would be on his trail soon, he could feel it. The predator was too skilled, too relentless. It would track him down with precision. But Alaric had a plan, and for once, he didn't feel like a helpless victim. He scanned his surroundings. The cave was enormous, its walls stretching endlessly into the darkness. The ground was uneven, rocky, with occasional outcroppings that could serve as natural traps. If he could use these, if he could lure the creature into one of them, maybe he could win. Alaric wasn't foolish enough to think the predator would just walk into a trap. It was clever, patient. But there were small details about the predator's behavior that he had learned from his brief encounters. It was overconfident. It liked toying with its prey, enjoying the chase. That was its weakness. Taking a deep breath, he gathered his strength and started to move deeper into the cave. He had no time to waste. Every minute counted. He had to set things in motion before the predator found him again. As he walked, his mind stayed sharp, analyzing the terrain around him. There were areas where the cave's natural formations could be used against the creature. Narrow corridors, sharp drop-offs, and deep crevices. The predator might be fast and strong, but it wouldn't be able to track him if he stayed one step ahead. Alaric's mind settled on a specific point, a sharp, jagged drop-off in the cave, just a little ways ahead. The ledge was deep, and the only way down was a narrow path that could easily be triggered by the predator's weight. If he could lead it there, if he could make it chase him, it would fall. It wouldn't even know what hit it. But it wasn't as simple as that. The predator wasn't stupid. Alaric would have to bait it, force it to pursue him without hesitation, without thinking. It had to think it was an easy kill. As he approached the drop-off, Alaric crouched behind a large boulder, taking care not to make any noise. His pulse quickened. He was on edge, his entire body taut with the anticipation of the chase that was about to begin. He was gambling everything on this. If he failed, it would be the end. His breath was shallow as he crouched low, listening intently. Then, in the distance, he heard it, the unmistakable sound of the predator's growl. It was close. Very close. His heart raced, and he quickly adjusted his position, ready to move. He could see the glow of the creature's eyes in the distance. It was searching for him. It knew he was here, it just didn't know where. Yet. Alaric steadied himself, his grip tight on the jagged rock nearby. He had to keep his nerve. The predator would strike when it felt he was most vulnerable. But Alaric knew its tricks. He knew how it thought. He wasn't going to give it that satisfaction. He darted out from behind the boulder, making enough noise to attract the predator's attention, but not so much as to give away his exact position. The creature's ears perked up, and its eyes locked onto him instantly. It was fast, too fast, but Alaric had anticipated that. The predator lunged toward him, its claws outstretched, but Alaric was already moving. He sprinted toward the narrow path that led to the drop-off, his heart pounding. The predator followed, its growls growing louder with every step. Alaric could hear the pounding of its feet behind him, feel the wind of its movements brush past him. It was almost there. Almost in position. Just a few more steps. Alaric reached the edge of the drop-off and, without looking back, slid to the side. The predator, too focused on its prey, didn't hesitate. It lunged forward, its massive form charging into the narrow path, thinking it had the human cornered. And then, with a terrifying roar, it fell. For a moment, Alaric stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat. The creature's roar echoed through the cave as it plummeted into the darkness below. He couldn't see it, but he knew it was down there. The fall had to have injured it, at least temporarily. He had to be quick. The predator wasn't dead, not yet, but this was his chance. He took off running again, but his steps were slower now, cautious. The adrenaline was beginning to fade, and the pain in his leg was starting to catch up with him. The predator might still be alive, and Alaric couldn't afford to lose focus now. The cave stretched on, and Alaric's mind began to race again. He couldn't keep running. Eventually, the creature would learn. It always did. The hunt wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But he had done something. For the first time since he landed on this cursed planet, Alaric felt like he had gained an upper hand. The predator wasn't unbeatable. It wasn't invincible. It could be outsmarted. Now, it was his turn to take control. The predator had learned, but so had Alaric. Every step, every move he made, had led him to this moment. He knew it wasn't over, he couldn't let his guard down now. The creature could still be lurking in the shadows, planning its next strike. But Alaric had changed. He wasn't the same man who had crash-landed on this hostile planet, terrified and alone. He had faced the galaxy's deadliest predator and lived to tell the tale. That alone was something he never thought possible. But it wasn't just survival that mattered now. It was the journey. The fight. The strength to push forward, even when every instinct told him to give up. The predator had been relentless, but Alaric had fought back with everything he had. And in the end, it wasn't just about outsmarting the beast. It was about mastering himself. About understanding that the real battle wasn't against the creature. It was against fear, against doubt, against the overwhelming weight of hopelessness. The cave had been his battleground, but his mind had been the true weapon. Each trap, each clever maneuver, had come from a place of desperation, but also of resolve. Alaric had learned something invaluable. He had learned that no matter how impossible the odds, no matter how terrifying the situation, there was always a way forward. The wind had shifted, and Alaric knew the predator was no longer in pursuit. He could feel it, the stillness that had settled over the cave, the air that had grown calm again. The predator had retreated, at least for now. Maybe it would return, maybe it wouldn't. But Alaric didn't care. He had survived. As he limped through the cave, his eyes scanning every corner, he realized something even more important. This wasn't just a lesson about survival. It was a lesson about the human spirit, the ability to adapt, to fight, and to never give up, no matter how dire the circumstances. The predator had underestimated him, just as many things in life had underestimated humanity. But that was the beauty of it, humans were unpredictable. They didn't give up. They found a way. Alaric stopped at the cave's exit and gazed out over the alien world. The sky was still dark, the landscape as bleak and desolate as ever, but in that moment, he didn't feel small. He didn't feel alone. He had proven that even the greatest of predators could be outsmarted. The universe, with all its vast, unimaginable dangers, had underestimated humanity. And that, Alaric realized, was the greatest strength of all. With a deep breath, Alaric took one last look at the cave behind him. The predator was still out there, waiting, learning, adapting. But Alaric knew that no matter what, the human spirit would never be defeated. And in the end, that was the most dangerous weapon of all.